What is up, guys? Today on the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, we're diving into some dynasty value shifts. So we got to start with Kirk Cousins. Big fallout here. Kirk Cousins was having a heck of a season. He was quarterback 6 through 7 weeks. Looked really good, averaging 19.3 fantasy points per game. He was pretty much, your solid QB2 that's giving you QB1 numbers, and that's how you win in Superflex League, especially in Dynasty. Towards Achilles. Man, that's a big value shift compared to what he is going to be there. So what is your fallout? And what we want to do also is we're going to give you guys options. So we're going to talk about how can you pivot. You're probably a contender with Cousins. I would hope so, because if you still had him and you're a rebuilder, I don't know what you're doing. So you're probably a contender out there. Where can you pivot if you need another quarterback? We're going to get into that. But just immediate takeaways from Kirk Cousins, Jeff.
Immediate takeaways, you feel bad for the guy, you feel bad for the Vikings because they have won 3 games in a row. They seem that they have righted that slow 1-4 start. And so you worry about Justin Jefferson, you worry about Jordan Addison, you worry about TJ Hawkinson. You realize how much Kirk Cousins was propping up in terms of fantasy football value, because it's not just the person that had Kirk Cousins, it's the person that had those players in their league as well. And so worry about those things. But immediate fallout, I mean, it's going to be difficult to replace what Kirk Cousins has given them. And I wrote today in my article that maybe they look at, I think Jaren Hall was a player that Christian was high on through the process, and he brings some level of athleticism. And we've seen players like that contribute down the stretch in fantasy. Like a guy that comes in back of my mind is Tyler Thigpen, who had some level of ability to run with the football and could throw as well, and became fantasy relevant and kind of was able to support a little bit of weapons in Kansas City when he had an opportunity. I think long-term, I mean, we already kind of had a good idea that Minnesota long-term, Kirk Cousins probably wasn't going to be their play. I kind of expect that. I think San Francisco might be in play on there. Maybe Atlanta might be in play on there, but I think they're moving that direction already. And so this probably pushes them even harder towards that accelerated pace of trying to find their next franchise quarterback, probably through the draft, I would have to imagine.
Yeah, I think this really does hurt the weapons, though, because while I very much so liked watching Jaren Hall play football at BYU, he has limitations, and I do think that Kirk Cousins was playing the best football of his career, probably. He was putting up insane stat lines, but not only that, his confidence to throw into tight windows. That dude will throw a dig no matter what. There won't be a quarterback that comes in and will sling the ball quite like that. And what that's done is that's given a ton of opportunity down the field to guys like Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson when he was healthy. I think what this probably does is I'm not overly concerned with Hawkinson, short term or long term. I don't think Jaren Hall keeps the job. I think when Nick Mullins is eligible to return off of IR as soon as he's fully healthy, I think Mullins is probably their guy. He was their guy coming into the season before the injury as well. For that, I think that they'll keep Hawkinson involved. But yeah, I mean, this is a massive, massive hit. I don't think that they're just going to magically be able to turn on the run game. They obviously looked good running the football last week, but I don't think that that's a sustainable thing for them, especially without Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins allowed them to do that. So you kind of downgrade everybody. And then from a long-term standpoint, I do think Kirk Cousins is going to be back. I actually think that he might be back with the Vikings. I understand that they kind of want to move on to their next option and kind of move out of the Cousins era, but I don't know that they're going to get high enough to get their quarterback in the future. I do still think that this team is, maybe they're top 6, top 7 in the draft. That's not high enough. That you need to be picking in the top 3 to 4 probably to get your quarterback. So obviously trades happen, but I wouldn't be shocked if Kirk came back on another 1-year deal and they kind of kick the can down the road a little bit and just roll with Kirk for another year.
I think this was best case scenario though for them, because then they got to kind of, for the Vikings, because this is going to be cheaper for them. So they could look at it as like, hey, we'll give you a 1-year prove it deal. We'll just bring you back. Maybe we go after someone in the draft. Like there's so many different options now that they had rather than paying that. But go ahead, Jeff. What were you going to say?
Well, couple names. So Carson Wentz is sitting out there still, but I kind of dug this morning trying to look and see if there were any ties through the coaching staff of the Vikings to Carson Wentz. I didn't see anything that like suggested that there's any shared history, anything like that, to believe that he would be comfortable coming into that scheme. So skeptical on that one. Josh Dobbs, I think, might be a name out there that it's the announcement today. The Carolina or that Arizona was moving on from Josh Dobbs being their starting quarterback. He was in Cleveland, and there was some overlap between Stefanski and Kevin O'Connell, and so some familiarity between the two systems there. That might be a name to look out for here at the trade deadline, but it's just you don't see them adding anybody that's going to keep them in the playoff race.
That's the tough part. And like, will this staff give up any type of capital because they're looking at it like, hey, will that help us? Is that going to give us over the hump? I think that's the question. Like, we can all like Jameis Winston, we can all like Trey Lance, we can all like these guys, but will that give them over the hump? I don't know. Now, as far as Cousins' dynasty value, this did happen in a league, so I did want to talk about it. And this is from the Dynasty Theory guys, and they did it. John Bauer over there. Nico Collins and a 24 third for Kirk Cousins. So this is superflex PPR. So just to kind of give you an idea of what is going over there. Now, as far as context goes, you know, the Nico side was an actual like a contending side, and they just lost Cousins, and they were trying to get some pieces, and they didn't need a second quarterback. They already had one. On the other side, Cousins is just like, hey, I'm going to stash him, rebuilding. I'll put him on there. If he does come back, we get that value. Just so from context wise, I don't mind the deal for either side. Like I understand it kind of on both sides, because Nico's probably a second right now. I think it depends. I know I'm a Nico hater, but I would assume if you wanted to trade something straight up for Nico, it's a second. So essentially, Kirk Cousins is getting valued as a second and a third. That's kind of generally speaking how you look at that deal. Do you sell this if you're a Kirk owner and you lost him, or you know how do you value this? What do you look at this deal, Jeff?
Well, let me ask you, first off, before the injury, would you have been comfortable giving up a first round pick for Kirk Cousins?
No.
Okay. Now we have an injury, and now he's out for the rest of this year. So, and I kind of value Nico. Nico lands in that big group of players that a second straight up, I don't know if I'm going to move off of him from what we've seen so far for just a second straight up, unless it's a very, very high second, but he kind of falls in that range between, I'd really like to talk about how I can tier into a first if I'm going to give up Nico Collins, and you're going to just want to give a second. And so like, that's kind of where I land on Nico Collins value. So like, I don't know. Like, I feel like that's a trade that, I mean, when Cousins is healthy, would Nico in a second get that deal done? Is the difference between him not playing a second and a third? I mean, where's that third going to land? Is that a late third? Because I do think we see real drop-offs in the third round, usually in rookie drafts. Once you get past the first 3 or 4 picks in the third round, you have major drop-offs there. So if it's a late third, then I kind of view it as just trading Nico Collins for that. I think it's a nice move for. I actually think Cousins is surprisingly a nice acquisition for if you're tanking, if you're rebuilding, if you're looking at going after Caleb Williams, then maybe you try to buy low on Kirk Cousins to, 1, eliminate those points off your roster, but 2, to set yourself up for there can be quick rebounds in Dynasty. And so and I'm almost of the belief that if you tank for a year or 2 in Dynasty and you are not at contender status, something's gone very wrong along the process.
Yeah, I like this deal. I kind of like it for both sides too, for a lot of reasons that you guys mentioned. But I do think that Nico in a second probably gets you Kirk. Now, of course, team build matters a ton, because if Kirk Cousins is my QB2 in Superflex, I'm not moving off of him unless it's a first, and I know no one's paying a first, so he was just gonna die on my roster. I think this actually opens up some opportunity for Kirk Cousins to be moved in your league. So, yeah, I mean, I've warmed up to Nico a ton this year. I think he's a very good player. I think Nico in a second is an ideal return for Kirk Cousins, but I certainly understand you're not getting any production out of that. And if this is a contender that does want, to keep contending despite this loss, that's a good move.
Yeah, and I think just understanding that, but getting those points off your team is important. So if you have Nico, you're rebuilding, you're like, hey, I want to get these points off because they could have those spike weeks. So like Jeff talked about too, trying to position yourself into Caleb, into those top tiers. Yeah, but as far as a value goes, what straight up a third? Like if you were going to give a pick, would you give up a third
I
or a
would give up
second
a
straight up
third
for Cousins?
for Cousins. Second might be. I mean, me. I don't know. Second might be pushing it. I probably would
Okay.
want a late third or a fourth back at this point in time. But I think it's Christian was mentioned a good point in superflex leagues that it can be so hard to trade for a quarterback in superflex leagues.
Mhm.
And so Cousins right now presents that opportunity where if you go out and acquire Cousins now, then you step into the offseason and say he resigns in Minnesota and they don't add anybody in the draft. And so, going into the year, okay, we're going to have normal Kirk Cousins back. That opens up opportunity now where you can have Kirk Cousins and other assets to have that conversation to somebody that might
Mhm.
have a younger quarterback or might have a different quarterback that you can kind of they're looking to tear down or to go in a different direction, and you can turn that Nico Collins in a third into
Yeah.
step it up into Cousins and step it up into like one of these top 15-ish quarterbacks in Dynasty.
All right, now let's help you guys out too. So what we wanted to do here is, let's say you had him as your QB2 Cousins, and you're looking still to contend. Who can you go out there and grab? So we were kind of talking about some quarterback 2 targets that aren't necessarily expensive guys. So pretty much all of these guys are going to find themselves outside the top 12 in most rankings. If you look here, football guys, or wherever you look at your rankings or your own personal rankings. So we're looking at outside the top 12. Who are some targets? So the guys that we have on this list is Russell Wilson, Sam Howell, Ryan Tannehill. Brock Purdy is maybe in there. According to Christian, he's been figured out by the NFL. We won't get into that conversation yet. But Baker Mayfield and then Geno Smith, we have all those guys kind of in that weird tier. Like Jeff's talking about, it is super hard to get QB2s. Like I lost a quarterback 2 in one of my leagues. I'm a contender, but they know it. My league mates know I need a quarterback 2. And so they're not going to give me a quarterback 2 for cheap, no matter what, because they want to extract that value there. So if I'm looking at this list, Christian, and we have trades to go with all these guys, but overall, who would your number one target be, just in a vacuum? I know league dependent, I know everything there, but who out of this group would you try to go grab?
I mean, if I'm a contender, I want to get the guy with the highest upside here. I think you can make an argument that that's Sam Howell from what we've seen, but I would actually lean into Geno Smith. I think there have been some, situations throughout this year. You missed DK Metcalf for a week. I think Geno Smith is starting to look like the Geno Smith that finished inside the top 12 last year. He's sitting currently outside of the top 12, I believe, down at QB 23. I don't expect that to continue throughout the rest of the year, which means that you can probably get him at a bit of a discount from that manager. So that's kind of the way I would approach it. But if Geno isn't the one, and you don't believe that Geno will turn it around, and you don't believe that that production from last year is coming back around, Sam Howell seems to be the one that, all of his sacks aside, and some problems with that Washington offense, of course, but Sam Howell is still putting up fantasy points, and that's what you're trying to acquire here.
For me, it's Baker Mayfield. When I look at this list, I mean, I see your point on Sam Howell, but to be honest with you, if I have Sam Howell right now, what are these trades like? I probably want more. I mean, that's decent-ish if you believe in Kenny Pickett, I guess. But I want a little bit more probably for Howell at this moment in time. Baker Mayfield strikes me as a guy that I think people just don't really view him as being a potential long-term option. But I do think that he's a potential long-term option, be it in Tampa, or I think he's got the ability. He's kind of one of those guys that maybe like a Ryan Fitzpatrick, where a team will say, we don't have a starting quarterback right now. We can bring Baker Mayfield in and for a year or two and get competent quarterback play. Maybe he saves a job for a coach or keeps a coach employed, bounces around the league potentially, and kind of has one of those careers where like Fitzpatrick, where maybe he can catch on for a couple years in one place and then you don't know how it's going to turn out. And so I think that's being at 28 years old, I think carries a little bit less value in terms of what people are going to want for him, because I think a lot of people probably view him as found money at this point in time. And he's producing better than Geno Smith. He's producing near quarterback 1 range almost. And so that's the name right now that I think that they can carry some value towards the future. He got great weapons in Tampa, and we've seen production out of him.
So for context, everybody listening, just so you know, the deals that we were looking at: Sam Howell, Demario Douglas, a guy that we told you to stash like, I don't know, 8 weeks ago. We were talking about him a long time ago. For Kenny Pickett and a 24-second. I thought this was a fascinating deal. Like, I actually really liked it when I saw it, because the Kenny Pickett narrative has been like, the second should have been on the other side at the beginning of the year. Like, when you're looking at who you're giving up in there, and even then you might had a first attached to that, just depending on the value, because Kenny Pickett's kind of been all across the board, but he's quarterback 25 right now. He only averaging 12.2 fantasy points per game. He has not looked great. Go ahead, Christian.
He's also like QB 35 in points per game behind guys like Tyson Bagent. So it's been
not
really,
great.
really bad. Yeah,
You do not
really
want to
bad.
be behind Tyson Bagent right now, unless you are on like Chicago weird socials and they're talking about him being quarterback one. But like, you're looking at that. Like, I think that's a fascinating deal. Like, I would do that deal. I think if I was a contender and I needed it, I don't think Kenny's winning you a league this year. Like, I just don't see it in terms of like, as that, because I don't think his floor is high enough as your quarterback 2 in Superflex with probably some of the teams in your league that you can have it there. Whereas I do think Hal could have those weeks, and he's looked really good. And I don't think enough's been said about Bieniemy in that offense. They're doing a great job. Now, the defense is not doing a good job, but Bieniemy there, and because the defense is not doing a good job, I think game script wise, the games in that division are going to be high scoring. So I like the Hal call. As far as Baker Mayfield, he's pretty much going for a second. So that's what Jeff was talking about in terms of the values, everything that was there. So, both of those guys are solid options. I would not throw any capital at Ryan Tannehill. I would not kind of go after Tannehill.
Okay, here's the
You're
hypothetical.
talking about putting him on IR.
Yeah.
The hypothetical would be that he gets traded to Minnesota, though, and they deal with that.
They're talking, yes, but they're talking about putting him on IR right now. So
It's a tough. As the time of us doing this show, we don't know where Tannehill is going to be. Now, if you want to take the risk, you have a couple extra force, and you're just like, hey, because he's really going for force. That's literally all I've been seeing him go for. And let's say you have 3 force that you just picked up and accumulated. You want to take a shot at Ryan Tannehill? I don't mind that. Like, whatever, just throw it at it, because a fourth to me doesn't matter. And you just kind of go after that. If he does get traded, you see a value bump anyway. But yeah, I agree with you guys on those deals. Like, when you're looking at that, Geno Smith's that weird one though, because I think some Geno Smith managers are going to have a first out there, and I'm not comfortable giving up a first for Geno Smith. And that's where like he's in that weird purgatory between first and second value, and where's he at? Can you kind of tier up, maybe add an asset to a second, and maybe go grab him? But yeah, I agree with both these guys. I'd probably lean Sam Howell if I could get Howell out there. I mean, when you're looking at total points, he's a top 12 guy. And we'll go from there. Anything else on the fallout here for Kirk Cousins?
I want to play devil's advocate on Sam Howell for a minute, because Washington does not look like a good football team. And while Sam Howell has looked productive, we've seen these players that have later draft capital before kind of have these spurts as quarterbacks. Yeah. And so if they lose most of the rest of their games and they fire everybody, clear house, I don't. Maybe they play him next year, but I think that long term, if they're not winning games, and even like to play it on Kenny Pickett versus Sam Howell, if they're not winning games, how long are they going to keep Sam Howell as their quarterback? Whereas on the flip side, Pittsburgh is winning games with Kenny Pickett, and we've seen that organization be very, I don't want to say stubborn, but they believe in their people, and they're going to give their people every single opportunity that's possible. Kenny Pickett being a first-round pick, if he's winning games and making the playoffs, I think that you've got a longer leash with Kenny Pickett, but you've got more immediate upside on Sam Howell right now. But the deal at the top there, Russell Wilson for Kirk Cousins. If you were to go, how much do you think needs to be added to Kirk Cousins to get Russell Wilson right now? And especially if the person that has Russell Wilson is not a contender right now. And like I mentioned, the ability to get some points off your roster, that kind of reset a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the deal we have here, Wilson and 2 24 thirds for Heineke, Cousins, and a 2024 second. I mean, I'd probably do that for Wilson. Push back on the Howell thing though. Like, I don't care about next year. If I'm making this one of these deals, I don't care about next year. I'm just kind of, I'll figure that out later. I'll approach that in the offseason. But if I'm going for a championship, like, Sam Howell is the clear upgrade from Pickett at least at this point, right? From what we've seen, there's like a 7 points per game difference. That is huge. That's matchup swinging. So
Yeah.
that's why, like, yeah, I get what you're saying. And I actually think you're right. I kind of think Washington's coaching staff might move on. I think maybe they move on. He's done some good things. He's done some bad things. But I think Pickett's probably entrenched as the starter there, sadly, for Pittsburgh fans. So I understand that line of thinking too. And going 1 year at a time isn't always the way I'd approach Dynasty, but in this instance, if you lose your productive QB2, I think you kind of have to go for it.
Yeah, and to your point, Jeff, I think Hal is Baker, just younger. Like, I think Hal can bounce. Like, he's done enough where maybe teams like him to where they're plugging and playing him. And we'll probably be talking about Sam Howell in 5 years when we're still doing this show. Like, that's kind of how I would look at Hal. Like, he's going to be around in Superflex and he has that value. And to be honest, like, I don't know. I like Demario Douglas too. Like, I'm not just gonna. I like him. I think that he's got some value as well. All right. Before we move on, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Comment below with your questions, recent trades, or thoughts on any of the topics that we cover.
Also, make sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to become a premium subscriber. Elite subscribers get custom Dynasty content for less than $15 monthly or $70 annually. We have the best Dynasty content in the fantasy football industry. Join today.
If you hear that sound, that is Jeff Bell getting a little squeamish in his chair because we had a new signing. We're looking at Leonard Fournette signing with his Buffalo Bills. He's in a weird spot because he's been a James Cook guy. He believes in James Cook. And it looks like Leonard Fournette is heading over there. When you're looking at, the deal with Damian Harris, he had his neck injury. Everything's going on there on injured reserve. So Leonard Fournette is back. Playoff Lenny. So what are we doing here? So you're the Bills fan. You know this probably with this roster better than most, Jeff. Just overall takeaways, right now thinking about what Leonard Fournette can do for this offense. What's his upside? What's his ceiling? Where are we going with this signing?
My initial reaction is this move was made because Latavius Murray is not getting the job done as a compliment to James Cook. That's why they went out and added Leonard Fournette. They said we need a power complement in this offense. As the weather turns, we need a power complement because we targeted Damian Harris, who I really don't know what's going on with him. He was on IR, and so I don't know if this is a season-ending issue or if this is what the issue is. But Latavius Murray has been given opportunity to serve as that second running back. He's been getting close to around the 10 touch a week barrier the last couple of weeks with Harris out, and he's done nothing with that opportunity. He's really, really struggled. And so that Fournette comes in and brings that scenario in and replaces him. You're just not going to play Latavius Murray anymore. You're going to play Leonard Fournette once Fournette gets up to speed, unless Murray really turns it around very soon, very quickly, because it is probably going to take a week or two before you really feel comfortable plugging Fournette into that offense to have a bigger role. As for James Cook, I just don't see a change, to be honest with you. I really don't understand the narrative that James Cook is going to lose all these opportunities. James Cook is a better receiver than Leonard Fournette. I understand you can look at statistics that Leonard Fournette caught a lot of dump down passes from Tom Brady. James Cook is a better natural receiver than Leonard Fournette. James Cook was a second round pick last year for this regime. James Cook has delivered on every opportunity, and James Cook wasn't getting goal line looks anyways. And I mean, that's always been the rub on him, that if you were to add a couple touchdowns here, you're talking about a legitimate running back one. He's not going to be getting those touchdowns. He wasn't before. And so I think that this almost opens up a buy window on James Cook. If the narrative is going to be out there that Leonard Fournette is going to eliminate James Cook or change James Cook's role or have a meaningful impact on Cook, I would go out and buy Cook right now, to be honest with you. But in terms of Fournette's production, in terms of his fantasy, I think that there's a chance for standalone value here. I think that if Murray was being efficient, was able to deliver on some of these goal line opportunities that he's gotten, you're stacking some points on there, a catcher too. I mean, I think Fournette can be a back-end RB2. I mean, he can be a playable option for you while Cook can maintain his current status.
I think this helps James Cook. I think part of the reason we've seen a decline in efficiency a little bit from what he did as a rookie. And I think a large part of that is he has taken on a lot more work. I think he's been a little less elusive, when he gets the ball out in space, which is not, that's part of his game. And I think part of the reason he's playing a lot more snaps, I think this allows the team to put him in situations that he can excel in, which we have seen time and time again for running backs. That is what we want. We want the running back to be in a situation where he can excel in. I think this allows him to be more of a receiving back and less a between the tackles guy. But I want to say all that and also bring it back with he's been fine. Like he hasn't been bad. He's been good, probably better than a lot of people expected. I don't have much interest in Fournette. I think he's a carry eater. I know you think he can be a back end too. I think he's more of like a I'm flexing him if I have to, and I don't want to type of player. But that's what Latavius Murray was, and I think Fournette's probably a little more efficient than him. And I do think he might catch a few passes here and there, but I do expect this to allow the Bills to open up the offense, create more touchdown opportunities. I think if Josh Allen continues the good play, I think this is just good for the team as a whole. I think Damian Harris was the best thing for the team as a whole. That option is not there anymore. So Fournette's, I guess, next best option.
Yeah, I'm not going to take away like Fournette's upside in receiving. Like I'm not going to just completely throw it away. I think that, you have to look at, he had 83 targets last year. Like, and I get it, the dump offs, and I see that kind of stuff. And I know Jeff doesn't like data that much. But like he could play a role. Let's say Cook struggles and Fournette, he's out there. Now, can Fournette carry it? No, he's not going to be able to do that. I don't see him being in that same role that he was like in Tampa. But I think that maybe he has running back to like low end, like if he gets that goal line work and scores touchdowns, but it's going to be super volatile. Like and because you got to remember too, Josh Allen's still there. So when we're talking about just who's going to get some of those rushing, those red zone carries and those type of things, you're going to be looking at that. And so that's the question. Now, I wrote about it in my big board. I do a Dynasty big board. I said just sell James Cook like 4 weeks ago. I was actually on the sell train there. I still was until this point because now you have Fournette, which is going to ding that a little bit. Fournette, you're gonna have to wait. If you held on in Dynasty and rostered him, you're gonna have to wait till he scores those 2 touchdowns in that one game. And if you want to move on, then that's kind of where you can move on. I don't know what you're gonna get. If you can get a second, I'd probably be pretty happy with that at this point. If he does that role, like if he has that. As far as James Cook value, I wanted to kind of bounce around and see here. I thought this was an interesting one because we have a couple stands of these guys. So this was in tight end premium, straight up. So this happened today after the Fournette news. James Cook for Trey McBride. Where are you going, Christian?
Trey McBride. I mean, come on. Of course we're going Trey McBride. I said last week he's on all of my taxi squads, or he was. So I just think McBride has top 6 option upside at his position. I don't necessarily see that for James Cook, but I never really did. So I think in tight end premium, I may have made this deal a couple months ago, honestly.
Where you going, Jeff?
McBride in tight end premium. I mean, Christian hits on, I don't know. How are you going to not say McBride a day after he has 14 targets, 10 receptions, 95 yards, and a touchdown? I mean, that's in tight end premium. That's very hard to say that. It was really
it happened today. It happened
without Zach Ertz involved at all. And you've got Kyler Murray coming back into that offense. I mean, he really has positioned himself as the second receiver in that offense, bouncing off Hollywood Brown. And so, no, you're going to go Trey McBride there. I think you got a lot better long-term run out with McBride in terms of production and probably higher end, just like Christian said, positional outcome. I mean, this is to move James Cook at this point for Trey McBride off last week. I mean, you did some work. You did a good job there.
All right. What about this one? James Cook for Christian Watson.
I still probably default to Watson. I mean, I had Watson valued above Cook, and I mean, I'm going to go for the wide receiver. I mean, I think that Jordan Love, I don't imagine the Packers are going to stick long term with Jordan Love unless he shows dramatic improvement. They seem like a team that doesn't. Drake May feel like a Packer. Drake May just feels like a Packer to me. But that's kind of, I think that they're going to add something there. Whereas Cook, I think if you need a running back right now, if you're in an immediate contributor, immediate contender right now, and Cook is kind of filling that running back 2 role, I mean, that's fine. But if you're able to flip him off this, it's just tough because the thing of it is everyone has said sell James Cook for a month and a half. And so when everybody's saying sell James Cook for a month and a half, what are you selling him for? And so maybe you can, I mean, Christian Watson, I think you're happy to pivot into there, or Trey McBride, you're happy to pivot into there, but it's just difficult to. And now adding Leonard Fournette now makes it even more of a sell James Cook. And so what can you do?
No, you just follow me and listen to me and read my stuff a long time ago. And I said, sell James Cook. That's what you do, everybody. But it's okay. Like, you're going to get there. Any final takes on Fournette, Cook, Bills? Anything in there?
I just want to say that Leonard Fournette's 83 targets was an 11% target share, and James Cook right now is a 9% target share. I mean, is it a big difference analytically between 11% and 9%? I don't really think so. So Tom Brady set an NFL record in terms of passing attempts, and so take everything in terms of volume on Fournette with a massive grain of salt.
Christian, I cannot wait until Leonard Fournette out targets James Cook this weekend, and I am just going to pepper Jeff in the chat, which he'll never respond. All right, let's jump over to Brock Purdy. So let's talk about him, and then we'll get off YouTube here. When you're looking at what he was able to do, he had 3 turnovers on Sunday against the Bengals. He's kind of come back to down to earth a little bit. Like, he had those garbage time kind of points. So from a fantasy perspective, yeah, I think he still finishes a top 12 guy overall. 365 yards, had a touchdown, but still had those 2 interceptions. And then against Minnesota, again, not great. 14 fantasy points in that game. Against Cleveland, 8 fantasy points. So we saw that high output when up to the Dallas game. Now on this 3-game losing streak, we've seen some issues. He's going into the bye in week 9. The question is, like, I've seen some people rank him top 12. I've seen some people for his value. He's all over the board. How comfortable are you with Brock Purdy as your quarterback too? So if you're in fantasy or in dynasty, I know that you probably got him around quarterback 20 to 30 value, maybe depending on your league. So I obviously you're still playing with house money because he's still valued higher than that. But like, are we concerned these 3 weeks? Is it an anomaly? What are we thinking here, Christian?
I'm concerned. Here's the thing. We had a pretty large sample size of Brock Purdy being a turnover prone type of guy. Brock Purdy got super lucky for a season and a half where he was throwing turnover worthy balls. They weren't getting caught, and that luck tends to come back around. And you know what he's doing? Over the last 3 weeks, he is second in the league behind only Gardner Minshew in turnover worthy play percentage. It has not been good. The caveat, one of the weeks was against what I think is the best defense in football, arguably, and the Cleveland Browns. I think they're very good. That was the one where you were like, ears perked up. This doesn't look right. And then this last week came around and Lou Anarumo put them in a blender again. And I think what the key has been is teams are now just playing 3 safeties and they're mixing up the looks across the middle of the field. Brock Purdy throws to spots in the field. He doesn't really, he throws to open spaces. That's part of the Shanahan offense. Teams have figured out what spots he likes to throw to, and they are attacking him in that way. Now, the sky is not falling. I think he's done some good things within those matchups as well. But it's worth noting that we haven't seen a stretch like this from Brock Purdy in his NFL sample. We saw 4 years of it at Iowa State. And so I get a little concerned. I still think that he'll bounce back. They'll figure something out. They'll start to do new things. Deebo Samuel coming back is going to help. Trent Williams coming back is going to help. But I want to kind of see how much it helps, or if this is a thing where teams have kind of figured out where they can attack Brock Purdy.
We started the show talking about what your pivot would be if you lost Kirk Cousins. And my real pivot would probably be to aggressively try to add Jaren Hall and Taylor Heineke on waivers right now if they're available in your league, and then try to go acquire Sam Darnold for very cheap, because NFL coaches will tolerate inefficient quarterback play. NFL coaches will tolerate 3 and outs, not moving the sticks like you really would like to move the sticks if you're in games. NFL coaches will not tolerate turnovers. Turnovers are killer in the NFL. And I don't have the numbers, but I do know that if you lose the turnover battle in the NFL, there is almost no other indicator outside of who scores the most points on who is going to win the game. And so I think that the way we've seen, and Christian exactly right, and this has been the talking point on Brock Purdy of, hey, he's throwing interceptable balls. The other teams are just not catching them. Now they're catching them, and now you're turning it over. And the same thing with Desmond Ridder over the last couple of weeks. Desmond Ridder was kind of playing inefficient ball, missing deep throws, but kind of keeping them in games, sticking around. 3 turnovers against Washington, 3 turnovers against Tampa, and all of a sudden now Taylor Heineke is getting opportunity to play. I think that Kyle Shanahan's not going to allow the season to go down the tubes just riding Brock Purdy. I think Kyle Shanahan's probably thrilled with the person that Brock Purdy is and thrilled to have that find. Kyle Shanahan will find out what he has in Sam Darnold if Brock Purdy keeps these turnovers happening.
I think you hit it on the head there. I think because of the way the Niners are built, they're built now. There's more pressure because Purdy's got to really there's pressure in everybody in building. Like, hey, you picked this guy. This was your guy. You got rid of Lance. He's got to be good. And I think they're feeling it because I think the fans are kind of looking at it like, hey, and I see like some weird like sample size stuff. Purdy doesn't have that big of a sample size for the NFL. You got to be very careful with this. Like, he still is relatively young when you're looking at what he did last year. Yeah, obviously his value, and you have to. The QB wins thing is hard for me, like, because yeah, they won, but how much of that was Purdy, offense, the weapons they had? They looked really good when they got CMC. So that's part of it as well. So like he's a complex dynasty asset. Like, he's a super complex. If you have him, you're still playing house money. I get that, but like, I wouldn't be comfortable trading a first for him. I see him kind of going for first, like late first. And I'd rather not give up a first and go pivot for those other guys if I lost a guy like Kirk Cousins. Like, I wouldn't be comfortable giving up. I'd like to keep that first if I have to go get some other assets as I kind of build out, if I have Howe on these guys. But yeah, I think both their points. I still think he's a starter, but if he can't take care of the ball, now we're talking about a whole different ball game in this situation with them. And Shanahan, he has not been proven to be the easiest coach to play for. Like, and he gets the people in doghouses fast. So like, that's the other part of it. I think this offensive line has struggled also. Like, obviously the injuries haven't helped, but there's little things about this, in terms of the value there. So from a fantasy quarterback perspective, the defense for the 49ers has not been good either. So like, the game scripts have worked out to where they've kind of been able to battle back. But that's really not his strength either. So that's like the thing with Purdy, you're watching, like, that's not his strength as a quarterback either. And for those of you that don't watch us regularly, like, we come from like a very college football background. So we've watched Brock Purdy play. I pretty much watched him play for the entire career of college. So like, what he has been doing has been such a shock to me, because I'm like, that's not the quarterback I've ever seen. I remember he threw it backwards in a game. Like, I've seen Brock Purdy all over the place. So I've seen that. So then he translates here. Oh yeah, so the offense is perfect made for him. But I don't know how well he does with adversity. I don't know how well he's going to do with defenses. Defenses have figured out something. I don't know what they have, but they've gotten the playbook now, and they said, we're going to go after this kid. So how does he battle back? They have this next game's huge for him. They have a bye. All right, let's look at the bye. Let's try to come back from it. Let's kind of build our big game plan in at Jacksonville. All right, let's see what he can do. And I think that is the telling game, and that's the game you need to watch to make sure to see what Brock Purdy's made of.
Yeah, in their next 4 out of their next 5 are against Jacksonville, Philadelphia, and Seattle twice. So yeah, I mean, they lose those 4 season. Yeah, Brock Purdy is not going to be the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, I'll tell you that much. But I do think that Christian is on the quarterback stuff. When a quarterback comes into the league, teams tend to play them very vanilla because they want to figure out what this quarterback is going to do. And so that safety might be parked at 15 yards, or, they're bringing pressure through this gap because that's what they do. As they get through those first 8 to 10 games of having film on that quarterback, now that safety needs to be parked at 12 yards, and you go through the A gap instead of the B gap. And you start to do these things that, just like Christian said, Lou Amarino, put Brock Purdy in the blender, and Brock Purdy starts seeing ghosts, and college Brock Purdy comes out, and all of a sudden that confidence is shot. No longer is he the hottest thing in the world. He's every day he turns on the radio, they're talking about, is Brock Purdy going to get benched? I mean, your life changes dramatically. And when you're Mr. Irrelevant, there is no baked in support. You're going to get benched.
Yeah. I mentioned the interceptable throws and then the turnover worthy plays. The fumbles are arguably worse this year. And I think he's got a 17 game sample now. Regular season 17 game sample, and he's turned the ball over 18 times, and 5 of those came last year, and the rest of them have come this year. So, or something like, I think 12 have come this year. So it's just things are not looking great on that side of things. And I do want to bring it back and say I do think he's gonna start. He's gonna get something figured out. But man, it's certainly concerning right now. And Sam Darnold has some talent. So, on that note, the full version of every show can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you head over to your favorite podcast app, hit subscribe to the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show.